3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Excitement is over the moon.
After months of delays and setbacks,
it's the first time we've flown this rocket and this capsule.
NASA's Artemis 1 blasts into the heavens, ushering in a new era of space exploration.
Now our generation is going to have its own moonshots.
Back to the moon and beyond. Now on the Inside Story, Liftoff.
Thanks for joining us. I'm VOA's Midwest correspondent Kane Fairbaugh here at Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral. 50 years since people last walked on the surface of the moon, hundreds of thousands are drawn to Florida's Space Coast to witness the beginning of a new chapter of NASA's human spaceflight mission with the launch of the agency's next-generation rocket and spacecraft system designed to return astronauts to the lunar surface with the goal of one day reaching Mars. The first step back to the moon, however, is unmanned and marks the beginning of NASA's Artemis mission. As it launches into the sky, it carries with it the agency's hopes of reinvigorating public interest in space exploration.
You know, there's a launch today.
For nearly 40 years, Brenda Mulberry has owned a space-themed clothing shop not far from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where business was slow since space shuttle launches ended in 2011.
Whenever there's a launch like...
But this year, she says, is different.
Yeah, excitement is over the moon.
People are flocking to Mulberry's store to get anything they can related to NASA's new Artemis mission.
On a normal day, we might see 60, 70 people in a day in our store, and we're seeing hundreds and hundreds an hour.
And here we go.
After overcoming some last-minute technical issues, NASA's Space Launch System, or SLS rocket and boosters,
Boosters in ignition.
successfully roared into the night sky over Florida's Space Coast, carrying an unmanned Orion spacecraft on a test flight to the moon.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
I always admired rockets and fast vehicles, so that's probably why I became a fighter pilot now.
Endrine, a Swiss Air Force F-18 fighter pilot, traveled from Switzerland to Florida just to watch the historic Artemis 1 launch up close, in person.
The SLS rocket has about 250 times the thrust of an F-18 fighter jet, so that's quite a bit more than I'm used to.
The loudest thing that has ever launched.
Retiree John McDonald joined throngs of visitors filling parks and viewing areas near Kennedy Space Center to witness the event he described as unifying for a country divided by polarizing politics in the wake of midterm elections.
Nobody here's talking about whether they're Trump people or Biden people. Politics doesn't enter into any of this. They're just here for one thing, to see space. They want to see that rocket launch.
Nobody cares about whether you're red, blue, purple, whatever. I think it is a great unifier to have something like this to latch onto.
Florida author and artist Josh Novak hopes the Artemis program reinvigorates interest in space exploration, like NASA's Apollo missions to the moon in the 1960s and 1970s.
But I can see how an event like that can bring people together and galvanize everybody toward a goal. And I think the goal should be improving life here on Earth, and I think a great way to do that is to explore space.
One of the main goals of the 26-day Artemis 1 mission around the moon is to test the new Orion spacecraft in preparation for crewed missions.
It's amazingly cool.
NASA astronaut Stan Love says the Artemis program will feature diverse crews, paving the way for the first woman and person of color to make history on the lunar surface.
We don't know who's going.
We are going to broaden our demographics, so it won't be just white guys on the moon.
I call it the Artemis generation, right? So Apollo had a twin sister, Artemis, and this is our generation.
Branielle Rodriguez is an integration manager for NASA's Orion capsule, which will house the astronauts.
And so I think it's a fantastic thing for us to be able to experience, be able to go explore and really put a presence on the moon.
It's the first time we've flown this rocket and this capsule, so there are many, many, many things that can go wrong. This is a test flight. Don't get your expectations too high.
But with throngs of tourists gathering in Florida for each launch attempt, plus reporters from around the world, Love knows those expectations are high, due in part to the program's large price tag. The cost of the rocket and boosters has grown from $10 billion to $20 billion. Each launch will cost about $4.1 billion. NASA's Inspector General expects the Artemis program's price tag to reach $93 billion by the time the first astronauts return to the surface of the moon.
But we have challenges. We got to make sure the vehicle's ready to go. We got to make sure it's safe for crew, and those things just take time.
Doug Hurley is a retired NASA astronaut who flew on the first crewed mission of SpaceX's Crew Dragon capsule to the International Space Station.
What do you say to people who say it's over budget and behind schedule?
I've heard that my whole career. Every aircraft I've been involved with, every spacecraft I've been involved with. I mean, we heard that when we were trying to get Crew Dragon flying. It was 6 years from the time the contract was awarded to the time we flew. I mean, it takes time to build these complicated machines.
Hurley says patience and expenditure will be rewarded.
I mean, when you look at NASA's budget, half of 1% of the federal budget. And SLS is a small part of NASA's budget. So to me, you know, it's all perspective.
Space Shirt's owner Mulberry says critics of the program are hard to find on Florida's Space Coast.
See, all those are old.
She credits Artemis with boosting jobs and tourism in an area that suffered economically when the U.S. Space Shuttle program ended.
I think everybody in this area underestimated the power this was going to have.
You're at the end of a very, long process, but maybe tell us how you feel emotionally right now to be in this moment.
People have spent significant parts of their career already to get this rocket to the pad, and I'm just so happy for them and excited for the nation, for the globe to be going back to the moon and then hopefully beyond to Mars.
The first crewed mission back to the moon, to orbit but not to land, is Artemis II, currently scheduled for 2024, with Artemis III returning astronauts to the lunar surface as early as 2025.
Recently, NASA announced their initial selection of 18 astronauts who will participate in the crewed Artemis missions. In the lead-up to the Artemis I launch, we talked with Victor Glover, a U.S. Navy aviator and test pilot, and now one of the astronauts hoping to make history in NASA's return to the moon.
So Victor, tell me what it's like to sort of be here right now in this moment. The clock behind you, which we can't see on camera, says minus 37:28:45.
It's unreal. I mean, it sounds a little cliche, but to be at the place where the Apollo missions launched from, all those shuttle launches happened from, and I actually launched from that next door neighbor launch pad right there just under 2 years ago. But it's still surreal to be here. This is one of my favorite places on the planet. And that's just any day of the week. But when there's a big rocket like SLS and Orion sitting over there, it's just the buzz here, the energy. It's really special. And my favorite part about this is the excitement of all the NASA employees who have worked hard for years to make this happen.
You weren't born when Apollo was happening, so I'm sure there's really nothing to equate this to, is there?
It's really neat to stand on the precipice of maybe the next thing like that happening, knowing it. We call things moonshots when humans do great things, right? And so our generation doesn't have that, though. We look back at Apollo for that inspiration. And so now our generation is going to have its own moonshots. And I love the fact that it's connected, though, the legacy of Apollo and Apollo-Soyuz and the shuttle and ISS and our partnerships with SpaceX and Boeing. People say this is a marathon, not a sprint. I say it's actually a relay race. And so those programs have all informed what we're doing now, but they've handed us the stick, and now it's time for us to run our best leg. And so this is going to open the door for us to send humans to the moon. And I mean, it's hard to imagine anything more exciting for people all over the world, right? I think people are going to be tuning in from all corners of the earth to watch this thing on Monday.
But this mission is also not just charting new paths in space, it's also sort of crossing historic barriers in gender, race, ethnicity, culture.
Well, of course, you've heard the line, it originally was, we're going to send the first woman and the next man to the moon. And then it became, we're going to send the first woman and the first person of color to the moon. Our office is diverse enough. We represent America. And because of that, we make our boss's job actually challenging. We make his job hard because he's got to pick some of us. And I think all of us are ready, trained, and capable of making this mission a success. And the astronaut office that we have today looks like America, so it's easy to do. But the fact that our leadership recognizes that they have a role in it as well to make sure that it happens and to support and encourage the continued dialogue about that, I think is really important. And so it is encouraging, and I think all people should feel supported by this effort.
Does the reality that you may be someone who charts some kind of historic milestone for humanity, is it something that seeps into your mind often while you're going through training or while you're talking to the media or while you're doing this? Or does it have a special place in your mind to prepare for this?
No, I think those kind of things can distract you. And I'm an operator. You know, I love this. I love the business, the hands-on, the eyes, the teamwork, working with these amazing people. And I really value the mission. I love having a mission and a great crew to accomplish that mission with. And those things to me are distractors. You know, there was a lot of talk about that for my mission to ISS, and I didn't focus on that. I kept my head down and just did the work. Inspiration drives decisions, right? It drives behavior. And so some little kid's going, I want to be like that, and I'm going to study this, and I'm going to eat my vegetables, and I'm going to be a good person. That to me is valuable, no matter what those kids look like. People keep asking me, you know, is it meaningful to you that little black kids look up to you and say they want to be like you? You know what? Let's be honest. I represent America. I'm a naval officer and I work for NASA. I represent America, and little white kids, little Mexican kids, little Hispanic kids, little Iranian kids follow what we're doing, because this is maybe one of the most recognizable symbols in the universe. And I think that that's really important, and I take that very seriously.
Is there anything you can do mentally to prepare for a mission to the moon? I mean, nobody in the program right now has ever been there before. There isn't like relative experience you can go to unless you're talking to an Apollo astronaut to help prepare you for what it's going to be like to reach the surface of the moon. How do you get ready, and how do you do this? Because it's not been done in 50 years.
There's going to be a great training program. We've got a great team of people that are thinking about how to train astronauts for this mission. One of the primary things all astronauts have to do, though, is integrate all of that and then take it into space and know how space is different than what you do on the ground. There's going to always be that, no matter where you go, low Earth orbit or beyond, on the moon or onto Mars. But there's also, like you said, talking to Apollo astronauts. We still have a few. We have some flight controllers and flight directors that were around then. And so being able to talk to those folks and get leadership lessons, operational things from them is very important. That legacy, passing the baton is a very important part of human spaceflight. But I think personally, I'm a little bit more of a philosophical astronaut, I would say. And I think it's important for us also to recognize when you go do something like this, to not just know there are unknowns, but to embrace it. You're not as prepared as you can be if you don't expect something to catch you off guard. And so knowing that it's going to happen, you're going to be able to process those emotions faster. And instead of going, oh my God, is this really happening? You're going to go, yeah, God, thanks for the preparation. And you're going to do the next right thing. And so knowing that you're going to a place not many human beings have been, I think is an important part of preparing for something like flying Artemis 2 or Artemis 3 to the moon.
Do you think the general public is invested, educated, and excited about this mission as they might have been for Apollo?
Because of the internet and the connectivity and the communication that's possible nowadays and how much easier it is, I think people are pretty well informed. The educated piece, hopefully they listen to us when we talk about things like the primary test objective being the heat shield. And as my friend Dr. Love reminded me, that the heat loading on the shield is proportional to the cube of your velocity, right? Those are really important, big things. And so hopefully the public is following that closely to know this is not a walk in the park. There's a lot about this mission that could go wrong, and that's going to help us to send people back to the moon. And so I think part of that falls on us to do that advocacy. But I think that the general public is. And all of that comes together, I think, to create, like, I truly believe there's worldwide excitement about this. I mean, I think people are going to be watching from all corners of the earth to see what we're doing. And hopefully more people have access to that connectivity and can share in that moment with us.
You're a military aviator.
Yes, sir.
And you have to fly by feel, right?
Sometimes.
You have to adjust the plane in order to move to the direction that you're giving it as the pilot, right?
Yes. Sometimes, yes.
This will be automated. This is going to be more automated than any other spacecraft in history. In Apollo, they had switches and knobs. Here, people on the ground will be controlling a lot of the flight maneuvers and the path of the spacecraft.
Yes.
As somebody who has that background, how do you feel about that automation?
Orion has an ability to dock to things, other things could dock to it. And so there are regimes of flight where we can have full manual control, and there are regimes of flight where we would have a blended, some sharing between manual inputs and automation. And so there's a scale, a range of sharing of that responsibility. And I think that that's the state of the practice, right? The state of the art is maybe one day going to be, who knows, it's controlled by thoughts and folks on the ground. But that software has gotten much better. Hardware has gotten a whole lot better, our manufacturing capability. And so I think that's progress. And yes, as somebody who likes to have a stick and throttle, I want to go up there and do aileron rolls in the thing, but the maneuvers it's going to do are so complicated that for me to have manual control throughout the entire regime of flight actually adds risk that we aren't necessarily trying to buy off on. So we want manual control where it really matters. Things like docking, things like landing on the surface, and then during entry to make sure that we have the ability to steer to a safe location to get us back down to Earth safe. And so those regimes are thought about and sussed out by the team, and we work very hard to make sure we have the right capabilities during the right times.
I have to ask, when will you know if you're going to get a shot at getting in the cockpit?
Philosophically, I know now I have a shot. Everybody in the astronaut office that's there now has a shot. And so that in and of itself is pretty cool. I mean, just to be where we are now and be a part of this team is truly an honor. And if your name gets called or not, I'm going to be happy to still be a part of this team and help from the ground, or if I'm at home on my couch watching on NASA TV. But maybe sometime within the next year, I imagine they're going to make those announcements. If this is successful, first things first. We have a successful Artemis 1. The crew for Artemis 2 should be announced within a year. Some people think it'll be a lot sooner than that, but I think we'll know. We'll feed the machine. The machine wants to know, I know, and we'll give you some names when it makes sense.
When you're home at night, talking to your family, how do you explain the gravity of all this to them?
Well, I actually,
no pun intended when I say the gravity of this.
Gravity,
but you know what I mean?
Good one, by the way. I think the gravity of this moment and this effort is, it kind of goes without explaining. I don't have to go into it. But I do just get to talk to them about our family's part in that, right? And so, we're watching with a little bit of a unique interest, right? We're sharing the same interest and inspiration the rest of the world is sharing, but at the same time, we're watching it with a little more scrutiny because our loved ones or our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues could be riding that to the moon next time. And so we really want to see that it works. So I think we have a keen interest in seeing, again, how this team works together and how they handle the challenges as they come, because there will be challenges. But ultimately, we want to see this hardware and software be successful because at some point, our friends and family are going to be flying on this thing to the moon.
Knowing where you're at now, knowing what you might have the opportunity to do, what would you say to 12-year-old Victor Glover?
Oh, wow. Oh, boy. That's a great question. 12-year-old Victor Glover didn't even know if college was a reality, and just no one in my family had graduated from college. And so there's a lot to this iceberg. What I would say to 12-year-old me is it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. But it's going to be okay because you're going to work so hard. And so that's what I would say to myself. This will take care of itself. Getting to this point and the amazingness of this, the awe of it all, it will take care of itself.
Man or people have not landed on the moon in our lifetime. That's about to change. Do you think we will get to Mars in our lifetime?
Oh, I think we will get to Mars in our lifetime. I said it a little while ago. This is a relay race. The journey to Mars has been 25 years away since we went to the moon back in the Apollo program. This is the first leg of the race to Mars. And so it's been 25 years ahead of us because we haven't started the race. When this is successful, we will have finished the first leg of that race and we'll be that much closer. I think it will happen in our lifetime. I think I may be too old to be on that crew, but to all those kids out there, be your best self. Listen to your mom and dad say please and thank you and eat your vegetables and exercise because those young kids are going to be the people that have a chance to put feet on Mars.
Thank you very much for spending time with us here at the Voice of America. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you, and good luck and Godspeed.
Thanks, Kane. Great talking to you too.
The work for future Artemis missions is already underway, thanks to the efforts of hundreds of companies employing thousands of people around the globe who are manufacturing and assembling NASA's Orion spacecraft.
For many who live on this block in Rockford, Illinois, it might be a surprise to learn the future of human spaceflight is under construction just down the street.
You wouldn't say that Rockford is one of the key cities for space, aerospace, and defense, and especially Ingersoll, so many people might not know.
But behind the walls of Ingersoll Machine Tools, work is underway to create critical components for NASA's effort to return astronauts to the moon and eventually to Mars.
So this is the barrel section of Orion. So it's the central section of the pressure vessel. It's where the astronauts will basically live and work, and the only place they'll have to go while they're on this mission.
The barrel is one of 4 components created by Ingersoll for the Orion spacecraft for NASA's Artemis program. Astronaut Rex Walheim will watch from Earth as the equipment is launched into orbit. He made history as part of the last space shuttle crew in 2011 and worked as NASA's astronaut representative to the Orion program.
Well, I'm one of the astronauts who interact with the Orion program to make sure they're taking account of the things that we need as astronauts, everything from habitability to safety aspects.
And NASA's focus is now on the harder, the more difficult destinations.
NASA's Deputy Associate Administrator for Artemis Campaign Development, Mark Kirasich, says the recent boom of commercial space companies allows NASA to focus on those more difficult destinations, such as the Moon, Mars, and beyond.
SpaceX, Blue Origin, Sierra Nevada, Boeing, the people manufacturing commercial spacecraft, ATK Orbital, they're working for a different mission, a different market, if you will, and they're doing a great job. We're able to fly quicker, cheaper to low Earth orbit, what I would call simpler destinations.
Focusing on faraway destinations for the Artemis mission has spawned new work for thousands beyond Florida's Space Coast.
The parts for the spacecraft, they come from all over the country. We employ thousands of people at over 900 suppliers, just like Ingersoll here across the country. We also have 10 European countries that participate under the umbrella of the European Space Agency that manufacture components for Orion.
Components made during our visit to Ingersoll are part of Artemis II, a mission carrying up to 4 astronauts about 40,000 miles beyond the Moon, planned for 2024. NASA's last crewed lunar missions occurred before Ingersoll Chief Innovation Officer Pier Giorgio Alessandri was born, but they made a big impact on his family and led him to move from Italy, his birthplace, to the United States.
It was during my childhood a big topic to discuss, and for me it made the difference to be in that nation and be now a citizen of that nation and participate to a program that will bring back people to the moon.
Ingersoll is one of many companies supplying components to Lockheed Martin, which won the overall contract to create and assemble NASA's Orion spacecraft. Assembling other pieces of the Orion capsules happens near NASA's Kennedy Space Center, at Lockheed Martin's new Star Center near Titusville, Florida, a former home of Space Camp and the Astronaut Hall of Fame.
This particular center here was an 18-month, $20 million investment by Lockheed Martin.
Kelly DeFazio oversees the work at Star Center.
We do the sub-assemblies here.
This is basically the nervous system, so to speak, of the capsule.
Exactly. Right? So these would all be, you know, if you walked by the Artemis 1, for example, you wouldn't see any of this. It's all within internal into the structure, you know, mounted into the structure of the vehicle. You know, the team here basically takes just one strand of wire, runs it out, and you can see how many different wires go into just one little connector, you know, or one little harness. So it's a lot of work, really hard work, meticulous work that the team does here, and does a really good job and has for a long time.
And I'm sure that there's literally almost miles of this in there, right?
Absolutely.
We also have different elements of our thermal protection system. The TPS system is made up of radiation blankets, thermal blankets, all the way to pillows for the astronauts.
The flurry of activity at Star Center is geared toward multiple missions.
We also have the side hatch here, and we're applying the TPS and that side hatches for Artemis II as well. So that launch is in 2024.
This is the panel that actually covers just adjacent around the hatch. So the side hatch would be right here where the white foam is.
Beset by delays and cost overruns, NASA estimates that when the Artemis II crew orbits the Moon in 2024, Orion capsule costs alone will top $13 billion. Overcoming delays and setbacks to get Orion off the drawing board and on top of the new SLS rocket system that propels it into space has taken longer than astronaut Rex Waldheim and others had hoped for.
Everybody wanted to do this faster, and everybody wanted the gap between the shuttle program and our deep space exploration to be shorter. But we are where we are, and we've made tremendous progress now, and now we're getting to the point where we're building the actual vehicles, and we're going to test them, and we're going to fly them.
But not enough progress to allow Waldheim to fly in an Orion capsule. He was not selected to join the class of astronauts scheduled for the Artemis missions, and retired from NASA. But he remains proud of his part in the effort to send people back to the Moon and beyond.
It's spectacular just to be a part of this program, to be a part of the program that's sending humans farther than they've ever gone before in the history of the Earth. Is just amazing, and I'm glad to be a part of it any part I can be.
We're going to take humans farther than we have ever gone before. So the platform is laid, the energy is high, and I think the Artemis program and the launch of Artemis 1 is just going to ramp it up that much farther.
Thanks for joining us on The Inside Story. I'm Kane Fairbaugh. You can connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at VOA News. You can also reach us anytime on our website at voanews.com. See you next week on The Inside Story.